Everyone. My name is Amy Rowe from Rutgers Cooperative Extension. We are so excited that you are joining us for our Fall Earth Day Everyday webinar series. We are now in our 5th year. We're very excited to have a theme of what a wonderful world, an environmental jukebox for New Jersey. Each of our 4 webinars has a musical song attached to it. So this week we are doing Born on the Bayou, looking at wetland habitats and waterfowl and ecosystems and all kinds of good stuff. And we'll get to that in a minute. Just need to clear up some of the logistical items here. So we are going to save questions until specific periods during the talk, so please put them in the chat. We will try to get to as many as possible, but we really want to make sure that our speakers get through everything that they need to get through. But please go ahead and put any questions in the chat for us. This session is being recorded, so please be aware that we will be happy to share the webinar recording with you. It will be posted on our Earth Day Everyday webinar page. I will send the website in the chat later, but we will also be having a survey and a poll at the end of this session. So please fill that out. We need to know what you thought and what you learned and how we can do better. But we are very excited to have 2 amazing speakers here. And like I said, I will get to that in a second, but can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So because we're going to be doing a poll and a knowledge check, we need to have your consent to participate. This is a research study. We are learning how much you are learning. And so in order to make sure that we are treating our subjects in a humane way, we need to follow protocol. So please say yes to do you consent to take a part in this study at the beginning of the poll. If you do not consent, you can say that also. There's no pressure there, but we would love to get as many people as possible to take our survey. So please go ahead and say yes or no based on consent. If you say no, you don't have to take the rest of the survey. So thank you for that. And if you have any questions, all that information is right here, or you can contact me directly because I am in charge of our humane subjects protocol. Next slide, please. All right, I would also like to let you know that Rutgers Cooperative Extension is an equal opportunity programming provider. We do not discriminate on any characteristic, basically any demographic, anything. We are providing programming for all. We want everyone to feel welcome and included. And so if you have any questions about this, there's some information there for you, but we do invite and welcome every single person that wants to attend our webinars. So just need to get through that. Okay, so now that we've gotten through all of our logistics here, we are going to go ahead and introduce our speakers. You can go ahead and put your first slide up. All right. So we are very excited to have Lisa Clark and Ben Langey from Ducks Unlimited, which is an amazing group that does wetland conservation programs, as well as protecting wildlife habitat for waterfowl and all kinds of really amazing things. I'll let them show you what they are working on. Our first speaker will be Ben. He is a working lands biologist for New Jersey, while Lisa is the Pennsylvania, New Jersey regional biologist. And both Lisa and Ben work with the Natural Resource Conservation Service quite a bit, and they are very well versed in wetlands biology and waterfowl habitat and how people can participate and work hard to protect those habitats. So I'm going to turn it over to Ben and Lisa, and we're so excited to have you here. So thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Amy. Again, everyone, nice to meet you all virtually. My name is Ben Langey. I'm going to be giving everyone a basic wetland ecology and biology overview, as well as a really high-level overview of New Jersey's wetlands. And then Lisa's going to be covering some waterfowl ecology and biology and discussing some of Ducks Unlimited's conservation programs in New Jersey. And then I'll circle back around to me to close it out to discuss some of our working lands priorities where we work with the Natural Resources Conservation Service to deliver wetland programs to private landowners and agricultural producers in the state. So without further ado, we're going to jump into some, again, very high level wetlands ecology and biology and discuss some of New Jersey's wetlands. So folks, if you already have a basic understanding of wetland biology, this might be a little boring for you, but we're going to start from ground zero and assume that you don't know the first thing about wetlands, how wetlands are governed in the United States, and the status of wetlands and what kind of resources New Jersey provides. So that's kind of what we'll be discussing. Uh, so the first question is, what is a wetland? And it's kind of sounds like a simple question. It's really a nuanced answer. There's a lot of different definitions. There's no single correct or indisputable ecologically sound definition. But wetlands generally in the United States are governed by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. This is through legislation that was passed in the 1970s, the Clean Water Act. And the Army Corps says that wetlands are generally areas that are inundated or saturated by surface or groundwater at a frequency and duration sufficient to support prevalence of vegetation that's adapted to live in wetlands. So saturated soil conditions. So really what they're saying is, okay, if there's water on the landscape long enough to support wetland vegetation, that's what a wetland is. New Jersey, the DEP that regulates wetlands in the state has a very similar definition, but they kind of build on that in designating a three-parameter approach, which is wetland hydrology, soils, and vegetation. So wherever you find these three things, wetland hydrology, wetland soils, and wetland vegetation, that is where a wetland will lie. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has a bit different of a definition. It's a transitional area between terrestrial and aquatic systems where water table is usually at or near the surface and the land is covered by shallow water. So the service or the Fish and Wildlife Service takes more of a habitat-driven approach to it, whereas the U.S. Army Corps and the DEP look at it more from a regulatory, very dry approach. And that three-parameter approach is something that you're gonna hear about a lot in this presentation, and we're gonna dive into that because really the three-parameter approach defines what a wetland is, where wetlands aren't, and what kind of wetlands you'll have. So these three things are hydrology, are the amount, duration, and frequency of water on a particular area of ground. And hydrology is the driving force of wetland formation. And it really drives what type of wetland you're going to see on a landscape as well. Then these hydric the hydrology of a wetland drives the development of hydric soils. These are soils that are saturated with water for all or part of a year. And these soils that are saturated become anaerobic, so without oxygen. And this is due to microorganism development and stimulation that occurs in these saturated environments. And these microorganisms use up a lot of oxygen. So in these soils, you don't have oxygen, and it creates very specific biogeochemistry that hydrophytic vegetation is adapted to survive. So there are certain types of plants that are adapted to live in low oxygen environments that have really wet feet all the time. So lots of water, but not a whole lot of oxygen from a root system where plants typically will use their roots to absorb lots of oxygen, and wetland plants don't have this ability because of their environment. So they've adapted a new way to live. And looking at these pictures, in the top left, you can see some wetland hydrology. In the bottom right, you can see that as well. Bottom right, you see some tire ruts, pretty indicative of a wetland. And in the top left, you see some standing water. Again, there's some wetland indication there. And then in the top right and the bottom left photos, we see hydric soils. The bottom left, you see a very typical gray soil. This is due to soil saturation in soils where iron, the element of iron is dissolved in solution and then is carried away by water. So what's left is, instead of having an oxidized orange rusty color, that's the iron oxidizing in upland soils, you're left with no iron in your soil, no oxidized iron in your soil, and you get these very gray soils. And in the top right, you can see that as well. This is actually a glade soil sample that I took where you have your iron in reduced form and it's being stripped away, but the soil is exposed to air, you can see that it's actually in real time as I'm breaking the sample open. I took a picture and you can see the iron oxidizing and becoming red, as that soil is exposed to air for the first time in a very long time. That wetland in particular stays inundated for most of the year. Uh, and so while all these things develop what will be a wetland, it's not a straight down process. It's involves some biofeedback. So you'll have wetland hydrology that's going to drive a certain physiochemical environment, which is going to determine what type of wetland you'll have, which will determine then what kind of biota are going to inhabit that wetland. Um, but all these physiochemical environments in the biota that occupy certain wetlands also feed into the hydrology, which then change the physiochemical environment, and then change the biota that are occupying that wetland. So all to say that wetlands are not stagnant. They're changing systems, always experiencing some sort of change. And we'll get into that a little bit more in this next slide, where we're going to look at different types of wetlands. Um, so there's a wide range of wetland types. You have everything from an ephemeral inland wetland, so something that's only there for a short period of time. Think of vernal pools and forests where lots of our amphibians breed and habitate, to permanent coastal wetlands when you think about our New Jersey salt marshes. North America ranges from large heterogeneous areas of wetland like the Everglades, to small but numerous wetlands like our pothole region. So you can have these big, large wetland complexes, or you can have really small pockets of wetland that might only be a hundred square feet can be a wetland. 100 square miles can be a wetland as well. Um, Ecological character is determined by the flooding regime, like we just discussed, and this is called the hydro period. And the hydrology then influences the biogeochemistry of soils, so making soils that have low oxygen or could be very acidic, might have a lack of certain nutrients, and this is going to change the types of plants that you find in different wetlands. And then wetlands, are characterized by the hydro period of the hydrology, and they're also characterized by the vegetation communities that are present, and then they're also characterized by the biogeochemistry. And through all three of these things, you can categorize wetlands. And a very common way to do this is the Cowardin classification system. And we're going to talk more about that a little bit on the next slide. But this diagram on the right here shows you that from all the way up from the start of the headwaters of a stream down to the mouth of that water hitting the ocean, you have many different wetlands on a gradient. So you can see everything from palustrine wetlands, which are freshwater wetlands, to lacustrine wetlands, which are associated with lakes and ponds, in open water habitats. And then you can start, as we go down the flow of the stream, you start to see some saltwater influence. You start to see, estuaries forming, some islands, and then, of course, your marine open water. So many different types of wetlands can occur, and a lot of different things go into what types of wetlands are occupying certain areas of land. In New Jersey, something that's really going to influence the type of wetland that you're observing are going to be the which physiographic region you're in. New Jersey has five: the Ridge and Valley Province up in the northwest, the Highlands, the Piedmont region, which I'm very familiar with as I sit in southeast Pennsylvania. Most of my wetland experience is in the Piedmont region. Then you have your intercoastal plain, which is a really neat transitional area, and then your outer coastal plain. And that's where most of New Jersey's wetlands lie, are on that outer coastal plain. So New Jersey hosts a diverse physiography, and that results in diverse wetland types. So New Jersey has everything from marine wetlands to lacustrine, again, our freshwater pond systems. They occur from small depressions, very, like I said before, 100 square feet, to large interconnected systems when we look at our salt marshes that extend from northern New Jersey all the way to the tip in Cape May, and then wrap right around that southern bend and go all the way back up the other side of the state along the Delaware River. New Jersey possesses a vast acreage of wetland. So this is all according to the Wetlands of New Jersey, which is a publication in 1985 that documented all of New Jersey's wetlands. And that's authored by Ralph Tyner. And if you're interested in anything that we have to say here, I highly suggest you go read that literature. Ralph's a wealth of wetland knowledge, and he actually teaches some courses at Rutgers Extension if you're ever interested in learning a little bit more there as well. New Jersey has a lot of deep water habitat, but the most common wetland habitat in New Jersey is palustrine wetland or freshwater wetland, and of those freshwater wetlands, about 370,000 of those acres are forested. So New Jersey's most common wetland is going to be a forested freshwater wetland. But other notable wetlands are estuarine wetlands and salt and brackish marshes. So this is a infographic that's gonna that shows you where the majority of the wetlands in New Jersey lie. Each county is broken up to percent makeup of wetlands. So really that southern tier up into central Jersey. Greater than 25% of these counties is mapped as wetlands, which is pretty impressive and a really great resource. So breaking these wetlands up into two main types, you have inland and tidal wetlands. So inland wetlands are, they highly rely on precipitation or groundwater for hydrology. And inland wetlands comprise most of all of our wetlands. So 95% of wetlands globally are inland wetlands. They're non-tidal, they're freshwater mostly. There are some instances where you have inland saltwater wetlands, and look out west for those. And there's a large glacial influence. So in northern New Jersey, wetlands exist where glaciers formed historic lakes. They carve depressions, they watch sediment down during melting. And these lakes filled in over thousands of years, hundreds of thousands of years. And as they filled in, they formed peat and bogs, and these are where we see a lot of our bog type wetlands in New Jersey or northern New Jersey. In southern New Jersey, there's permafrost during the last ice age. And these conditions create thermokarst terrain. So this is where you have freezing and thawing of the landscape, and through freezing and thawing, you get these small depressions, and these depressions actually fill in with water and become these sinks in the landscape where water drains to and doesn't drain out of. And through inundation, you end up with a wetland. Um, Inland wetlands are also biologically driven by ecosystem engineers. So if we think about, I think the most common thing people think of here is beavers, but humans also create wetlands by altering hydrologic regimes. We at Ducks Unlimited, we do this intentionally quite a bit. So some of our restorations will involve constructing a low berm and letting water build up behind that low berm. And as water builds up over time, you're changing the hydrology of the area, and you're influencing wetland conditions and thereby creating a wetland. And then other inland wetland types are floodplain wetlands, and these along rivers behind levees. So you might get a natural levee from a flooding event, and as floodwaters recede, some water will be left behind that bank, and create a wetland as that area is going to remain inundated or maybe infrequently inundated for certain periods of time. Tidal wetlands. These wetlands, per their name, are influenced by the flows and ebbs of tides. They're typically coastal or lie on salinity gradients, but they can exist from tidal freshwater to euhaline, so anywhere from ocean water, 35 parts per million, to 0 parts per million, completely freshwater. Great example of this is many of the New Jersey rivers that drain to the Atlantic Ocean. In their headwaters, they're going to be completely fresh. Down towards the mouths of these rivers, they're going to be extremely salty. But in between, you're going to have a range of salinity that are still tidally influenced. The Delaware up near Trenton is a good example of this. It actually has quite a range of tidal rise and fall, but it's a completely freshwater system. But salt marshes, which New Jersey has an incredible amount of, are the most productive ecosystems on Earth, and that's measured in primary productivity, so vegetative growth. Um, and it's important overwintering habitat for waterfowl and other shorebirds. And that's where us at Ducks Unlimited get real interested in these systems, is when they're critical to habitat for waterfowl and other migratory birds. The coastal plain, the outer and inner coastal plain that we looked at on that map on the previous slide, extends from New Jersey all the way down to Texas. And the dominant species in here, bunch of Latin names here, but essentially exist on a gradient, and we're going to see that in an infographic here in a slide or two. Freshwater tidal systems, as I mentioned, they're extremely productive. They're heavily used by wildlife. And again, something that New Jersey possesses quite a bit of that a lot of our inland states do not possess much of. So this is a good example of a gradient of freshwater marsh. So moving from your mean low water on the left to your mean high water, uh, encroaching into the right. You can see along the top here your different types of wetland habitats. Moving from left to right, open water where you have water almost all the time. Low marsh where you have water, but your depth to your sediment is a little bit higher. Your high marsh where you're starting to lose that inundation. And then a wooded swamp where again you're losing more and more inundation and open water pockets to a forested upland on the right. Uh, and then moving to our tidal or our tidal or salt marsh wetlands, you start instead of seeing in this previous slide where you see the mean and high water marks, and this might be driven by precipitation or groundwater depending on the time of year. This is all driven by our tides. So you might have some extremely high spring tides encroaching higher up, but you can see the split, and this is the important split to note is your area that's always inundated and your area that's only inundated during tidal flux. And this is where you're going to get your regularly flooded zone, your low marsh and tidal flats, and then your irregularly flooded zones, which are your high marshes. And then moving on to wetland loss and conversion in New Jersey. So between the 1780s and the 1980s, New Jersey lost about 39% of its wetlands. Primarily, this was from human alteration of the landscape, draining wetlands for crop production, pasturage, filling wetlands for houses, transportation, and other development. But New Jersey was one of the leading states in writing regulations that protected their wetlands. In fact, the Clean Water Act was kind of modeled after New Jersey's wetland regulations and is one of the only states in the United States that the U.S. Army Corps relinquishes jurisdictional authority for the inland wetlands of New Jersey, where they say, New Jersey, your wetland regulations are pretty darn good. We're going to let you handle it because we're comfortable with the way that you regulate your wetlands. So it's neat for New Jersey. It creates a permitting headache for Lisa and I, but it's overall a net positive when thinking about wetland conservation. Um, and threats still remain today, although the regulatory structure has changed. We're still facing threats from filling and dredging and development and construction, draining wetlands, mining, and then also from uh, things like sea level rise and droughts and hurricanes, erosions, biotics and invasives. And some notable invasives that some of you might be familiar with are Phragmites australis or common reed. Some folks refer to it as foxtail. But you'll see that along the coast quite a bit and along inland wetlands as well. Other invasive species like reed canary grass and Japanese stilt grass are also common. Um, and then this picture to the right here is an example of wetland loss, where on the left we have an aerial image from 1930, and on the right we have an aerial image from 2020. And if you look right towards the center of the screen, you'll see the Salem River. This is a photo taken of the Salem River basin towards the mouth of the river. An area called Mannington Meadows, or known as Mannington Meadows. Used to be a meadow bank back in the day. And if you're wondering, like New Jersey Meadowlands, this is all derived from the same phenomena of managing our wetlands, our tidal wetlands along our estuaries in New Jersey for the production of salt hay, which was a very common product that was used back in the early 1900s and 1800s and 1700s for cattle fodder, for packing, for lining coffins, for your mattress, just about anything you can think of. Salt hay was used for, and as salt hay was lost as an agricultural practice, a lot of the infrastructure that was associated with that ag practice was lost as well, and with that you lost a lot of wetlands. So this is just a good example of conversion of high marsh, so an emergent wetland, to open water. So going from emergent wetlands that have a lot of habitat value to open water, which doesn't have quite as much habitat value, especially when considering waterfowl. So if you're wondering what you can do, Lisa's gonna give a pretty in-depth overview of what we do and kind of what you might be able to do as a volunteer in New Jersey, but a really easy thing that you can do from a federal standpoint is to buy your duck stamp. Um, your duck stamp is every cent of that goes towards wetlands conservation. It funds legislation, a bill known as NACA, or the North Americans Wetlands Conservation Act. That those dollars are earmarked for wetlands conservation, and our Ducks Unlimited uses those funds to fund a lot of our projects. There's a competitive grant application process to obtain these funds, but it is all derived from the duck stamp, and it's uh, our biggest tool in conserving wetlands in the United States. And while duck stamps are required to hunt waterfowl, you can go buy your duck stamp anytime that you'd like. I just bought mine at the post office a couple weeks ago, and I usually buy two or three. One stays in uh, my licenses for hunting and must be signed. Another I just keep for keepsake, and then the other I give away to someone as a gift each year and let them know a little bit about conservation and how conservation funding works. Another federal act that, if you don't know, is a neat thing. The Pittman-Robertson Act places an excise tax on all outdoors hunting sporting equipment. So, any firearm sale or ammunition sale, backpacks, bows, arrows, all have an excise tax, and all of that money is dog-eared for conservation. States can then go apply for those funds based on the number of hunting license sales they had in their state that year. So that's just another interesting little tidbit. Hunters, largely hunters and anglers, end up paying for the majority of conservation in the United States. It's just how our system works. And if you want to increase the funds that are available for your state that you live in, even if you don't hunt, go buy a hunting license, because it will allow your state to ask for more dollars back from the federal government from the Pittman-Robertson Act, and that's known as the PR for folks in the conservation industry. So in your state, like I just said, you can buy your state hunting license. A lot of those funds also go directly towards the budget for the year, funding biologists and conservation staff, managing habitats in your state. And then, also opens up more federal funding for your state as they apply back for those PR dollars. And then also some states sell a state migratory waterfowl permit to hunt waterfowl. New Jersey does this. Pennsylvania does this. I don't believe New York does this, but also just another thing that you can go do within your state to help funds come back to the place that you're living. And then finally, local and grassroots, go spend time in your national wildlife refuge. Your wildlife refuge managers will appreciate it. You'll gain some appreciation for the habitat that's available. It also it's a little gray, goes back into the federal bin a little bit. But then the last thing is join an NGO, join a non-government organization or a nonprofit of your choice. Obviously, we're biased towards Ducks Unlimited, but we do some pretty great work. Up in the top left corner, just 2 weekends ago, I was doing some salt marsh restoration with a bunch of volunteers. So it was me and another biologist, using the grant funds to do the work. But then also we had 15 volunteers with their own boats helping us transport materials and install materials into a salt marsh to try to build that salt marsh back up. So after that, we'll break for questions, and then we'll move over to Lisa.
Great, thank you, Ben. That was great. So we have a couple questions. The first one is, are vernal pools considered wetlands?
Yeah, in New Jersey they are. So New Jersey regulates anything that meets wetland criteria. So anything that's going to have hydric soils, hydrophytic vegetation, and hydrology in a vernal pool will meet all of those. It depends on what state you're in, and you have to keep up with the most recent court cases on what's going to be regulated federally. But for example, Delaware doesn't have as strong of wetland regulations. And if that wetland isn't navigable, if it isn't adjoining a traditionally navigable waterway, then it's not going to be protected by the U.S. Army Corps, and it's not going to be protected by the state of Delaware either. But in New Jersey, everything's protected. Any wetland is protected. And my advice is always, if you're unsure if it's a wetland or not, save yourself a consent order from New Jersey DEP and a bunch of fines, and hire a wetland consultant. They're not that expensive, and they'll delineate your wetland for you.
Thank you. Are duck stamps actually stamps or are they something else?
Yeah, they actually they are stamped. So if you can go to your post office and you can buy a stamp. God, I wish I had one on me right now. We just moved into a new house and I actually usually keep a bunch on my desk. Yeah, it's a stamp. It's like a larger, it's not a typical stamp where you'll get like, 25 stamps. It's one stamp. It's about yay big. It has some beautiful artwork on it, and then you can peel that stamp off if you want to. I don't know why you would, unless you're hunting and need to slap it on your hunting license, but it really is quite beautiful. They're pieces of art, and there's a competition to develop the artwork for the duck stamp every single year.
All right, thanks. Is there formal tracking of the percentage of wetlands that are lost each year to things like invasive plants and human threats?
In a roundabout way, yes. There's some mapping that goes on, usually on a 5-year cycle, depending on your state and your data source. So we have estimations of how much wetlands we're losing. With the advance of a lot of our geospatial technologies, those estimates are increasing in accuracy, like every year. There's something called light detention. The light detecting and ranging is called LiDAR, and it's the ability. It's a technology used by satellites to send lasers down to the Earth's surface. They bounce back up. Depending on what data they receive back, you can determine whether something's a wetland, what kind of covers on the wetland, the vegetation, and then you can compare year to year and see what has changed. But it goes so far as you can determine whether something's covered in Phragmites or not. So yes, short answer is yes. We do track it. And I wish I had a better resource to send someone, but New Jersey open source GIS can give you a pretty good idea of what you're looking at.
Okay, that was actually the next question. Is there a website for the wetland maps?
Yeah, New Jersey, if you just type in to your web browser search engine of choice, just New Jersey, is it NJ GeoWeb? And the New Jersey DEP and Fish and Wildlife Geographic Information System folks are wonderful. They do some really great work. And they have a lot of public facing maps where you can look at where wetlands are, what types of wetlands are there. You can look at a lot of really cool wildlife corridors. Oh, what's it called? There's a New Jersey Fish and Wildlife mapping software um, that lets you look into a lot of habitats in New Jersey, and I can't. The name is escaping me.
Okay, well, we can figure it out later. But why don't we move on for now? And then there will be time for questions after Lisa's section and then after Ben's final section also. So keep sending questions, but we're gonna move on for now.
Hi, everyone. So big thanks to Ben for setting the stage so beautifully, to have me just sort of dive into a little bit more detail with waterfowl ecology, and then I'll wrap it up with some examples of DU projects. So thanks, Ben, and would you be able to advance that next slide? So for about the past 88 years, Ducks Unlimited has worked hand in hand with local, state, federal agencies, as well as numerous nonprofits to continue its mission. And it's a really incredible institution for sure. And what's important is that I like to let folks know that this just isn't a mission for waterfowl hunters. DU's mission aims to conserve, restore, and manage wetlands that benefit not just waterfowl, but also other wildlife and also people. If you were to look at wetlands through a more like societal or human-centric lens, there are numerous ecosystem services that humans benefit from with conservation work related to wetlands. Wetlands are really incredible resources that are vital to having a really healthy environment that we live within. And, there's a few examples here in this slide below, but in terms of, wetland buffers along the coast, I mean, it sounds like you guys have had presentations with the Hurricane Sandy. I mean, that you realize how important these wetlands are to actually serve as that first line of defense with some of these storm surges. Flood and drought mitigation to local communities. This is a really important resource that helps sort of trap excess water or hold water during drier times. Carbon sequestration, it's not one that really often comes to mind, but it's also serving as a carbon bank, similar to, say, an old growth forest that's storing a lot of that carbon in biomass. Habitat for wildlife and fisheries also sort of feeds into this outdoor recreational aspect that influences tourism, economies, and that these are very much linked with the natural resources that are around. We often hear of wetlands referred to as nature's kidneys, which I've always really enjoyed that term. And this is just due to their natural processes that help trap and remove sediments and pollutants. And so can't say enough of how important these wetlands are and how exciting it is to be able to work with DU and sort of help feed into this type of really exciting work. So Ben, if you'd advance. And Ben already touched upon these ecoregions, but I love to think of New Jersey as a small state, but it packs a really hearty punch in terms of habitat diversity. There's a whole suite of different systems. Ben outlined a lot of them. Just to point out some particular areas, the Atlantic coast, the Delaware Bay, is supporting hundreds of miles of ocean and bay shore that all types of wildlife and fisheries utilize. You have the tidally influenced areas that are important, as well as the brackish wetlands. You have inland wetlands that constitute, these freshwater forested wetlands, lakes, rivers, and a lot of those are sort of occupied in that Piedmont, that ridge and valley area that Ben had sort of outlined earlier. And you also can't discount the really strong agricultural presence that New Jersey also has. A lot of the waterfowl species that comes to mind is a lot of geese will take advantage of, excess waste grain within the state that also offers an additional food source. Next slide, please. And so New Jersey's habitat diversity contributes to its really reputation for overall bird diversity as well. Waterfowl can be found in abundance, really great abundance when these varieties of wetland habitats throughout the state, including, some examples, wood ducks occupying some beaver swamps up in the northern part of the state, while you also have snow geese occupying really vast marshes and, agricultural fields along the Delaware Bay shore in Woodstown area. Additionally, salt marshes and sandy beaches of the Delaware Bay support a significant horseshoe crab breeding area and also serve as a critically important stopover area for migrating shorebirds that feed on those horseshoe crab eggs, especially sort of the red knot. And so you sort of have all these really complex food webs in these systems, which, really help influence and keep a lot of these migratory bird habitats and populations healthy. The state is really largely important to migratory and overwintering for waterfowl, but it also does provide significant breeding habitat as well. I'd say, the big four notable New Jersey breeding species in waterfowl would be mallards, black ducks, wood ducks, and then everyone's favorite, the resident Canada goose. Also, it's really significant and important to mention that New Jersey has a really rich birding community, especially down south in the Cape May County area. One example of this that comes to mind is each year the New Jersey Audubon group counts an average of I think it's something crazy like 800,000 seabirds at this Avalon Sea Watch annually. This is a small team. It's consisting of really highly dedicated individuals that pretty much count. They go to this point here on the star map here, And from sunrise to sunset, from October to December, day in and day out, they're counting every single thing that flies by, from whether it's a hummingbird all the way to raptor species. And so the location of Avalon is actually significant geographically. If you see on this map where it sort of has this dog leg that extends out into the ocean a little bit. And so as birds are migrating south in the fall, they actually hug that section pretty closely, and it makes it pretty advantageous for birders to be able to count and identify those species. So if you ever have the ability to get out there, it might be worth just swinging by and seeing how all this plays out. It's also critical to also mention that New Jersey waterfowl hunting population is pretty rich. There's about 1,300 or 13,500 hunters that hunt annually. There's a lot of individuals that will come out of state to have their opportunity to hunt certain species that tend to congregate mostly in New Jersey and along the coast. So it's definitely an important state for a lot of recreational user groups. Next slide, please. And so I know you're not supposed to really pick favorites, but for New Jersey, there's definitely two bread and butter waterfowl species that stick out. The last slide I mentioned that overwintering importance is really great. And that's really certainly true for these two species here. The wintering black ducks, which are on the left portion of these photos and below on the left side here, you have these birds that are occurring mostly throughout New Jersey, but they tend to be pretty abundant and pretty highly associated with tidal marshes of the Atlantic coast and the Delaware Bay shore. New Jersey supports approximately a third of the wintering population within the eastern United States. So that's definitely some pretty significant numbers for black ducks. Some will breed in New Jersey, but most black ducks will actually head up north into Canada and sort of fan out over Ontario, Quebec, and the Maritimes to breed. Hopping over to the Atlantic brant. This is a small goose species. They're pretty small in stature. They're actually about the size of a mallard or a black duck. But these birds actually will nest in the Canadian Arctic and winter predominantly on the Atlantic coast between Massachusetts and North Carolina. However, really the core wintering range and their wintering density population is highest along the coastal New Jersey up into Long Island, New York. This is an area that's really important because there's about 85% of the population that winters in that smaller section along New Jersey and New York. And they'll spend from probably anywhere October, usually October 31st is when they start to pile into New Jersey, and they'll stick around until May before heading back up to Canada to breed. And they travel about 2,000 miles. They'll go all the way up to Baffin Island and Southampton Islands. And so they're long distance travelers, but they're really impressive because they go to remote parts of Canada to breed, yet they come to one of the most populated areas in the United States to overwinter. So they definitely have a special place in my heart for sure. And in terms of just habitat, Atlantic brant are highly associated with the Atlantic coastline, and they spend most of their time foraging at low tide on mudflats, on beaches. You'll occasionally also see them up on grassy fields, baseball fields, soccer fields, and the like. Next slide, please. And although I dedicated, 2 slides for 2 species, please know that there are many other waterfowl species that spend a great deal of time in New Jersey, at least a portion of the year. All waterfowl, whether it be ducks, geese, and swans, and other migratory birds and wildlife, are also unfortunately exposed to a whole suite of resource challenges to their habitat that are pretty threatening. And some of those include, rising sea levels with coastal erosion. You have development with urban sprawl, water quality impairments that threaten that overall wetland health and the natural functions of wetlands, and then also just high and increasing human density just intensifies some land use changes and has the ability to limit a lot of remaining habitat. And these challenges are not just in New Jersey, they're if not region wide or across the country as well. So in that sense, it gives DU a lot of opportunity to work with partners. So next slide, please. We like to think of this that because of all of this opportunity, it gives us this ability to, help develop projects, work collaboratively with folks, and to really try and maximize our conservation outcomes with what resources DU and partners are able to obtain for certain projects. Next slide, please. And so some of these conservation efforts, they can sort of occur in very numerous forms depending on the particular site and the particular goal. Some of these restoration efforts look to restore ecological functions. Others look to, have these long-term protection of maybe critically already protected or important areas. So we often, Ducks Unlimited, will work with federal, state agencies, or some local land trusts to help them purchase really critically important habitat. And then we end up passing fee title off to them, or we work with them to be able to purchase the property and protect it in perpetuity. We also have situations where we work really closely with land managers and the impoundments or systems that Ben had mentioned, where there's certain wetlands that are created, that we can work with them to make sure that they have proper tools and infrastructure so that they can actively manage some of these public lands to maximize the benefits to waterfowl and other wildlife. There's also a great ability to provide technical assistance to landowners that are, wanting to do conservation work on their property. And then always, depending on certain projects, there might also be a research need where DU works with, entities, institutions to help sort of answer some pretty tough questions. Next slide, please. And as much as, understanding the landscape is important, it's also really critical to also understand the biological needs for whatever species you are or the group is interested in protecting or looking to safeguard. And so there's physical attributes that will play a role in habitat selection. And so those are things that DU and Partners wants to consider. There's also annual cycle demands that need to be considered. And then a lot of research suggests that foraging habitat is often identified as a limiting resource, in particular migratory and overwintering habitats. So that's something that we also really like to be mindful of as we look to develop projects and see where we can have the best conservation punch, so to speak. Next slide. So I guess from sort of like a biological needs and sort of tap into a little bit more of the ecology of things, I thought it would be kind of fun to just highlight that there are some biological, differences between sort of two groups of ducks. And so oftentimes you hear them being divided into these two groups. And so the name of these groups are sort of distinguished based on their evolutionary foraging strategy, where you have in this photo on the left, the distinguishing factor is called the dabbling duck group. And so this group of duck typically feeds in shallow water bodies. They tend to occupy, really 6 to 12 inches, sometimes a little bit deeper habitat, and they are often seen upending, where they put their head in the water and they tip their butt up in the air. And so that's sort of a characteristic foraging strategy that they adopt. Physiologically, they can also be characterized by their takeoff strategy. And what I mean by that is them being able to, and it's sort of in this lower photo on the left, where you can see this mallard duck hopping right up off the water's surface and being able to take flight. So that's definitely characteristic of a dabbling duck. This group of birds generally have iridescent speculums. And so in this colored photo at the bottom left, you see the mallard duck here. The blue portion of the wing is considered the speculum. And so for dabbling ducks, they tend to have pretty colorful features in that region. Next slide, please. While you have this other group of birds is referred to sort of as the diving duck group. This duck also sort of includes sea ducks, which would be scoters and eiders, but their foraging strategy typically, includes diving. And so they're diving to identify and capture clams, fish, crustaceans, all types of benthic aquatic invertebrates. They tend to occupy deeper habitats such as lakes, reservoirs, big open bays, and their anatomy is actually different from dabbling ducks in that their feet are actually placed farther back towards their rump. And so this makes them really exceptional swimmers. However, they're extremely clumsy on land. And so they really steer clear of walking on land as much as they can. And for them, in order for them to take off from a waterway, they actually have to almost flap their wings and patter across the water to get enough air under their wings to be able to take off. So the best analogy that I've heard and I like to use is you think of diving ducks as sort of a fixed wing aircraft that actually need a runway to be able to take flight, while a dabbling duck is more analogous to, say, a helicopter, where they can sort of ascend vertically almost instantaneously. This diving duck group tends to lack a colorful speculum, and so a lot in this photo here, you can see that this consists of like brown, grays, blacks, and so that's sort of a diving duck feature here. Next slide, please. This is just a fun graphic that someone shared with me. I thought it was kind of clever to show that there are these different foraging strategies based on different types of water birds, and so this sort of helps reduce competition as well, right? If you have all of these different evolutionary strategies so that they can feed in different habitat types. Next slide. This is just sort of a figure format as opposed to an animation. So observational data has sort of identified these preferred water depths that certain guilds of birds typically prefer. And so this too is a factor that DU considers when developing and engineering certain projects. We want to be able to identify what species we're trying to benefit most, if that is a necessary question, and then how can we maximize the conservation impact and consider those biological and physiological aspects of those certain species. Next slide, please. So in terms of wetland diversity, this is another really important factor that we like to consider. Waterfowl and other wildlife undergo these different annual cycle demands throughout the year. And so the importance of wetland and habitat diversity is really critical to consider when you're looking to enhance and restore sites. For one thing, not all marshes are created equal. So when possible, wetland and waterfowl managers attempt to create a diversity of wetland habitats on the landscape so that this can provide for a suite of resources for wildlife, including waterfowl to use. And so on this slide, I really attempted to showcase that there are two freshwater marshes at different successional stages. And so the one on the left here is considered early successional marsh. This is sort of after a disturbance, you get a lot in sort of this explosion of forbs, grasses. These tend to have high calorie food items. You have aquatic invertebrates that really occupy these types of systems. And so there's a lot of wetland diversity here. For waterfowl, I would identify these as being really critical landscapes, especially during those times when the caloric need is greatest. So this would be winter, especially, and also migration where they're traveling long distances or they're trying to keep warm through that time. Where on the flip side, late successional marshes are important. These are slower to develop. This early successional marsh would eventually transition to a late successional if it lacked disturbance. And so this actually ends up consisting of less diversity, but it's a more stable system. And so if you think during certain times of the year, you have, hens nesting or trying to raise a brood. When you have little ducklings, the key is to keep them alive and keep them away from predators. And so a lot of times this type of marsh can offer food, but also offer important cover to keep them safe. Same thing with molt. Ducks will lose their feathers at a certain period in the summertime. They're rendered flightless, so the ability to have them provide cover and hide in these certain systems are really important. Next slide, please. And so cross-seasonal effects are also another note I wanted to mention, just sort of highlighting that there is a relationship and link between waterfowl populations and events during certain times of the year. And so, for example, winter habitat conditions and the ability for a bird to obtain sufficient nutrients and resources will carry over and influence the bird's success during migration and or the breeding season. And so all these events sort of are linked in a way and influence body condition, survival, and reproduction. And so this ultimately does have impacts to waterfowl populations. And so this is why at Ducks Unlimited, they work really hard to have positive conservation outcomes across North America, whether it's on breeding grounds, migratory and wintering grounds, like the whole kit and caboodle. is important to sustain waterfowl. Next slide, please. And so I think I just have a handful more slides here. Just wanted to touch on some of the DU conservation examples. So just wanted to highlight some of our current and ongoing work. These two projects are restoration projects, but we do have numerous others in the works, including land protection where, I had mentioned earlier too, but one site is Manahawkin, which is in Ocean County, and then Sapana Meadows, which is in Salem County. And then just in terms of just sort of a synthesis and a report, since 1984, which is when DU started to do work in the United States, for New Jersey stats, conservation work has protected over 20,000 acres. And that was with the help of various grants, donors, supporters that have ended up contributing over $11 million to help get these projects in the works and rolling. So definitely a team effort, lots of individuals to help make this happen and make DU have such a great conservation impact in New Jersey. And so next slide, I'll dive into two projects here. So the Manahawkin Wildlife Management Area, this is a restoration project to restore 70 acres of coastal emergent and forested habitat. And so this is New Jersey Fish and Wildlife. We worked with them for a federal grant to obtain money to pretty much restore non-functioning infrastructure so New Jersey Fish and Wildlife can manage a site for waterfowl. What the goal is to convert this tidal open water lake system and convert it and have it to be more diverse habitat. So really trying to aim to create shallow emergent marsh so that we can support greater number of waterfowl in terms of providing forage habitat. Also, there's a lot of benefits to resiliency in terms of climate change and sea level rise. And so really looking forward to this project. We hope that it'll get to construction here pretty soon. Next slide. The final project is Sapana Meadows National Wildlife Refuge. This is a marsh resiliency project. As Ben sort of mentioned earlier, there's sort of a history of salt hay farming in this region. And so this too was an area that had sort of received soil compaction, tidal restriction, ended up leading to heavy, erosion and elevation loss, and created pockets of open water, which decreased the marsh acreage and sort of enhanced its susceptibility to further erosion. And so this created a really great opportunity with partners, including Fish and Wildlife Service and U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Next slide, please. And so efforts were made to sort of remove existing rock that was sort of constructed as part of agricultural practices and other situations. The breakwater, which is outlined in blue here, was used to sort of reinforce the current existing breakwater. But the really neat aspect of this project that I like so much is that there was partnership with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineer, who does general, dredge maintenance in the Delaware Bay to sort of keep these open for shipping channels. They ended up, instead of placing and stockpiling the dredge material elsewhere, they worked with conservation groups to strategically place it on the marsh to help that marsh restore to historical elevation and encourage plants and marsh vegetation to reestablish. The first phase of this occurred in 2024, and so next phase is being planned. And yeah, so this is an active photo here showing the active placement of the dredge material. So definitely really exciting work, and looking forward to see this project progress. And I think that was my last slide here. So I know I went a little over, but thank you so much.
Amy, did you want to break for questions here or continue on through the next?
I actually don't have any questions for this segment, but I just want to let you know that we are at our 7:30 usual stopping point. So just want to allow you to finish for sure, but just wanted to let you know that we may be losing some people. So
Sure.
please go ahead.
We can give the speed round version of this too.
Okay, thank you.
So to kind of build on Lisa's presentation, Lisa does what is known as our our traditional side of Ducks Unlimited. So partnering with federal and state and nonprofit organizations to do a lot of work on public land, some private land work as well, but really like larger projects. So I'm a partner employee with the USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service. So I provide technical assistance and project planning and increased capability for the NRCS to deliver their programs. And so while I'm employed by Ducks Unlimited, I spend most of my days working directly with our federal partners with the NRCS. And this is part of the Working Lands for Wildlife Initiative. The Working Lands for Wildlife Initiative is a landscape-wide project across the United States where the USDA and the NRCS have identified key species that need some assistance due to some population declines over the last century. One of those is the American black duck, which is my focal species. And you can see that highlighted on the right side of the screen on that map where it says American black duck, and it's highlighted in yellow and green. Other focal species in New Jersey include the northern bobwhite quail, the bog turtle, and the golden wing warbler. But through this initiative, we're able to provide free technical and financial assistance to agricultural producers through the Farm Bill. If you don't know what the Farm Bill is, it's a large act that provides funds for farmers to complete conservation on their farms, as well as many other things. It's a really large bill. But it also includes conservation efforts. Anything from planting cover crops to keep your soil on the land during the winter to completing voluntary wetland projects. But the Farm Bill is the largest funding source for conservation on private lands in the U.S. The American black duck, my focal species that Lisa very kindly introduced, is endemic to North America. It was once the most prolific dabbling duck on the eastern seaboard. It experienced about a 50% population decline from the 1950s to the 1980s due to overharvest, wetland habitat loss and degradation, but also contaminants in competition with hybridization of mallards. Mallards are not native to the eastern seaboard. That's a phenomena that's occurred over the last couple centuries with the urbanization of the eastern seaboard. Black ducks are highly secretive and seek refuge in some places where humans typically aren't. Mallards will nest in your garden. So that's kind of the big differences between those two ducks. Population recovery goals will be accomplished by protecting and restoring wintering habitat. So while it's important to protect breeding habitat with all duck species, limiting factor with American black duck seems to be a lack or loss of wintering habitat. And this requires combating habitat loss, but to development, pollution, and wetland conversion and marsh migration, but also in restoring what we already have lost. And the figure to the bottom right here is just a population graph of American black duck from the 1950s through 2015. So you can kind of see that it decreased quite a bit, but since the mid to late 80s, the population has stabilized. So we're not still losing black ducks, but they're not what they once were. And this is just kind of an idea of where we're placing focus. So all of the blue areas on the map have a protection priority where wetlands are established that meet the needs of black ducks as they winter. The orange and red are areas where we need to restore wetlands and protect them. And this is due to wetland loss and known use of black ducks and other dabbling ducks through these areas as they migrate through over winter and or breed. So American black duck habitat. These two maps on the right show you the top left is the breeding habitat. The bottom right is the wintering habitat. The distribution of black ducks throughout the year. But their habitat requirements are. I really liked this quote. I pulled this out of my Baldessari textbook. But it's so diverse that the presence of water is virtually only the only common characteristic. So they'll use just about everything. Black ducks in New Jersey, typically when you ask someone if you need to go find a black duck, where do you go? You go to the salt marsh. So they use everything from salt brackish marshes. They've been found nesting in beaver ponds in the Adirondacks, beaver ponds in New Jersey. So they use everything from fresh to salt water, from streams to rivers to tidal systems and anything in between. Their breeding habitat occupies an array of wetland types, like I just said. And as I said before too, they prefer wetlands that are highly isolated from human activity. And as Lisa already mentioned, New Jersey salt marshes and coastal back bays provide habitat for about a third of the wintering population of black ducks in North America. So it's pretty important for New Jersey and for the black duck. So we've talked a lot about like wetland loss and degradation, and here's just a few examples of what kind of loss we're talking about. So anything that drains, so ditching and tilling, or sorry, tiling a wetland will drain a wetland. So that's going to deprive it of that wetland hydrology that we talked about before. And if you don't have hydrology, you're not going to have wetland soils, you're not going to have wetland vegetation, and that's not going to be good habitat for a duck or any other migratory waterfowl species. So filling, just taking in that a low spot in a field, like if you can imagine this picture second from the left, if you were to just place fill in that area, now the elevation's raised, you're not going to get the hydrology that can degrade a wetland. Tilling, which if you again look at that picture on the left, you see farming practice just tilling right through and planting through this wetland deprives it of wetland characteristics, but also through centuries of tilling and allowing soil to loosen up, that through erosion and soil movement, you might end up with that low spot filling in over time. Invasive species, looking at stuff like Phragmites, mowing and brush hogging, so destroying wetland vegetation is gonna deprive wetland biota of what they need to survive. Um, so what you can do to steward your land, if you have something like this, in trying to restore these wetlands, you can enhance wetlands that already exist, try to manage them a little bit better, maybe manage them for some invasive species. You can restore wetlands that have been degraded. So maybe taking that picture of tilling, maybe taking that small pocket of wetlands out of production and letting that just be a wetland. Maybe it's planting some trees that have been brush hogged or cut down, or restoring some hydrology by plugging a ditch or crushing some drain tile. Um, and then the last thing is protecting wetlands. So wetlands that are within 15 kilometers of a coastal marsh have been shown to be of high value to American black ducks. They use it for thermal refuge. So making sure that those wetlands stay there and that they're not going to go anywhere is really important as well. Um, and the NRCS has a few programs that can help landowners, private landowners, in achieving these goals. One is the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, or otherwise known as EQIP, and it's a cost share program. So all of the technical assistance is completely free. The cost of actually putting the conservation on the ground is aimed for 75% cost share. So based on costs in the area, the NRCS will reimburse landowners up to 75% of the total cost of the conservation practice. Maintenance requirements vary depending on the practice employed, anywhere from 10 to 15 years. But these types of projects help develop shallow excavated wetlands, manage shallow water habitats, install very low berms or dikes with water control structures that help you manage the hydrology of that wetland, but also can include things like wildlife structures and wood duck boxes, and a lot of other different conservation practices. Another program, and this is more getting into the protection side of things with the NRCS, is the Wetland Reserve Easement Program. And this program works in that if you have land that has been farmed in the past, and that farming harmed wetlands or degraded wetlands in some way, if you've owned your land for more than 2 years, you can apply for a wetland reserve easement, where the NRCS will come in. Again, all of the technical assistance is completely free. And the NRCS can come in and they'll pay you for the value, the fair market value of your land that you enroll in an easement, and then B, they're also going to cover 100% of the restoration costs. So if you have a larger site, this is usually more economically feasible, but it is a real estate transaction. It's a permanent easement, so it takes a long time to go through. It's a rigorous process and can take quite a bit of time. Thinking on the time scale of maybe 2 to 3 years to get that easement closed, another 3 years to see your wetland restored, but then it's protected in perpetuity, and the NRCS will maintain that wetland, for as long as the easement's on the land, which hopefully is going to be in perpetuity, permanent. Um, So some of the eligibility characteristics for wetland reserve easement are going to be, again, farmed wetlands, prior converted cropland. So that's a term. It just means that it was a wetland, it has been cropped, maybe it's still cropped. We put that back into a wetland. Um, Farmland that's become a wetland as a result of flooding. So as we talk about, changing tides and sea level, you look at a lot of South Jersey. Farmers are battling salt intrusion as well. So all of these things can be reasons if your farm's too wet to farm, if a corner of your field's too wet to farm, give me a call. I can come out. Everything's voluntary. It's all free. And you can pick my brain about wetlands and waterfowl habitat, and we can poke some holes in the ground. So Amy, I'm about to go through some project highlights and examples. So I know that you wanted to jump in really quickly here.
Yeah, so thanks, Ben. Everybody, I am going to start our poll. So please go ahead and answer that. I know we lost some people, unfortunately, but please, it's really important for us to understand what you learned from this and how we can do better. So please take a look at that. And now we'll let Ben go ahead with the rest of the presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Amy. Sorry for going so long too. I guess one great thing about working at Ducks Unlimited is we're all so passionate about what we do, and I think it shows when you see a couple employees giving presentations about waterfowl and wetlands. We go a little long in the tooth because we like it so much. So here's an example. So on the left we have a farm field, and it's not very productive. It's not much. It's just an acre or two, and that's really our bread and butter, our sweet spot in our Farm Bill program. We're not doing we can do large projects. WREs can be, 100, 200 acres in size. They can also be an acre in size. We've done wetlands that are under an acre. We don't like to do them that small, but we'll do them. Anything for another acre of wetland habitat on the ground is what we'll do. So on the left here, you see a field that's not producing well. On the right, you see a low berm along the back. You see that there's some wetland hydrology here now. You see some wetland vegetation. All that was done was this area was dished out just a little bit. An excavator lowered the elevation of this land by maybe 12 to 18 inches. Put that material, the excess material, into a berm through a water control structure in there. And now you can manage this area to create wetland hydrology and then wetland soils and subsequently wetland vegetation and all the different macroinvertebrates that are associated with that. And you can actually see ducks landing in this wetland, which is pretty great. This is another, again, an equip project. You can see this low area. It's actually a ditch on a wetland. And this ditch was plugged, a low berm was formed. The area was dished out again a little bit. And you can again see, this is an early spring picture. You can see the berm starting to green up. The wetland vegetation isn't really popping yet, but last year's vegetation is still left over. But here's, comparing to the previous slide, a little bit bigger of a project. And if you're wondering about waterfowl usage and utilization of these types of wetlands, great thing is a lot of our landowners, after a project's completed, will throw a trail camera up or a game camera up, and you can just see really high waterfowl utilization. And there's actually a graduate student at University of Delaware that's just about to start and start evaluating some black duck use of different types of wetlands, and a few of our wetlands will be included in that study. So that'll be really neat to see, just exactly how much utilization these restored wetlands are getting. So with that, in keeping time in mind here, I'll wrap it up. Here's my contact information. Take any questions that have come through. If not, then I guess we'll just wrap it up. And feel free to text, email, call, whatever it is. I'll talk to you.
All right. Well, thank you both, Ben and Lisa. We really appreciate you being very passionate and very excited to talk about this amazing subject and the great work that you're doing. So thank you for that. We have a lot of people that are very curious about your funding and if you've been impacted by federal funding cuts lately.
Sure. So I'll just start. So the grant funding that provides for my position is secure. So I'm still working. Still talking to you all today. My colleagues at the NRCS are furloughed right now. So while I can still go out and do a site visit and talk to you on the phone, applications for programs are paused until the government is back in session. I know that we've had, I mean, Lisa, you probably be able to speak to larger grant funding at DU a little bit better outside of Farm Bill stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely some federal funding sources. I feel like the shutdown has created definitely some challenges and a bit distracting, but we're hoping that, once things are up and running again, at least from the federal NACA grant, that, we'll be able to, again, sort of move forward and be able to send some applications in for grant funding. But yeah, it definitely is an interesting time for the grant world, both federal and state funding for sure.
All right. So also, people are curious if you work in North Jersey or only South Jersey.
Um, right now we will make special trips to the North Jersey. Our grant funding does call out Gloucester to Atlantic and South. But there th we have engineering assistance that's available throughout the whole state. So our team consists of me as the Southern New Jersey Farm Bill biologist. This is talking about the Farm Bill team, this is separate from Lisa. And then we also have biologists in Maryland, Delaware, and Virginia. And we have an engineering technician that supports our team from New Jersey down to Virginia. So we can do projects up in Northern Jersey. And we're hoping that the Southern New Jersey program will see the success that warrants additional grant funding that will cover Northern New Jersey as well. The program has been established in Maryland, Delaware, and Virginia for about 5 years, 6 years. Our expansion into New Jersey just occurred last year. So testing the waters in South Jersey, but as you saw on that map that I showed, there is a lot of need up in the Ridge and Valley province.
Thank you. Then we have a question about how to deal with Phragmites, and is there any resource or contact that someone that's concerned could could reach out to and have someone come out and try to figure out how to stop the Phragmites, or are there any resources available for that kind of thing?
Lisa, do you want this one?
I'll let you take it, Ben, but Phragmites is definitely a tough nut to crack, especially if there's the seed source maybe not on your property and it's elsewhere. It's really good species for doing what it does best, and that's establishing and taking hold and out competing. And so in terms of invasive species in New Jersey, I would say that this is definitely the ringleader, and it's tough. There is management strategies. Spraying is expensive, and it often takes, persistent and continued spraying. There's, combinations of cutting and flooding and spraying. So if you're able to get to the seed source and really tackle it up front, that's amazing. But I find that often a lot of the situations are, there's an existing seed source, or it's so expansive that the ability to try and tackle it is just, it's pretty overwhelming.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. Well, thank you.
As
Oh, go ahead.
as far as resources go, you can reach out to me if you'd like. There can be funding for it. Like Lisa said, it's difficult. It's like pedal to the metal as far as management and treatment goes. And the second you let off just a little bit, it's going to come back. So it is extremely difficult to treat. But if you're concerned about it, you can try to contact New Jersey Fish and Wildlife or DEP or the NRCS. You can try to contact Ducks Unlimited. We have treatment programs down in Delmarva that are going on right now. We just won a big grant to treat a bunch of Phragmites down there. But it is like it's a difficult, nuanced uh, uh, beast. It's more complicated than you think. Spraying it will work, but then you need to you need to treat the underlying issue. You need to the Phragmites is kind of just the symptom that you see, but a lot of times there's something else driving why Phragmites is there. And that's more difficult and expensive and time consuming. And there isn't a consensus on
Yeah. So there was one question specifically about the picture of the restoration project you, Ben, did with your volunteers. There were large bales or rolls in that picture, and this person wants to know what they were.
Yeah, sure. So those are called coir logs, COIR, and it's bamboo husks that are bound together by more bamboo. And they're an erosion control implement. In this specific case, our coastal biologist, Jim, and partners with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and Natural Lands Trust, we're placing these coir logs in a salt marsh that has experienced some sinking and erosion issues, where we're trying to slow down the flow of water so that sediment and suspension and water falls out and starts to rebuild the marsh by building up elevation so that vegetation can establish again.
Thank you. So those are all the questions that I have. Thank you so much, both. We have a lot of thank yous coming in here and great presentations and thumbs up and hearts. I'm sure you saw all of those. So thank you so much for coming to speak to us about wetlands habitat protection and waterfowl. It's very interesting. Like I said, we haven't covered this topic before, and people love to hear about wildlife, so we appreciate the deep dive into the ducks. But yeah, thank you so much. We would love to continue this relationship, and we'd love to even possibly partner and work on things. But yeah, this is great, and yeah, we had a pretty good crowd. So thank you, everybody. Next week we are going to be talking about light pollution. So please join us next week. And yeah, we will be posting the recording within about a week or so. So if anyone had to leave or missed it or whatever, we'll be sharing that with everyone on our website. Let me put our website on there for you in the chat. So if you're looking for it, so please let's thank our presenters here again, Ben and Lisa. And I'd also like to thank my colleague Steve, who is part of our Earth Day Everyday team that's supporting here also. So yeah, we'll see you next week, and thank you everybody for joining this talk.
Thanks, Amy.
Thank you, Amy.